Hey guys, I'm back with another video from Military Rated. This one is titled China's attempt to destabilize Denmark, Sweden, Finland, and Norway. Guys, these Nordic countries are just, I love the unity so much. So anything that tries to break it, guys, I really want to get into it. Let's just go straight. Thank you so much, Military Rated, for this one. It's not new, but I just saw it, so I'm going to be checking it out. Before then, subscribe to my channel if you're not yet subscribed and give me a big thumbs up. Let's get straight into the video.
Is China secretly trying to control the Nordic countries through apps like TikTok and financial incentives?
Oh,
What if I told you that China is
I
not
didn't even
just
think TikTok was going to be the
resources, but is also trying to influence the very heart of the Nordic region through espionage, disinformation, and even the apps on your phone? From TikTok tracking your data to covert operations aimed at undermining Nordic governments, the stakes have never been higher. And it's not just about politics. There are real lives and global power dynamics on the line. But here's where it gets even more tense. Did you know that the Nordic countries are becoming safe havens for some of China's biggest critics, including the Tibetan opposition? And that this is one of the things that anger Xi Jinping more than anything else. Stick around, because in this video, we're diving deep into how this growing tension could reshape the future of international relations and what it all means for the Nordics. To start, let's turn the dial back 5 years. In 2019, the Nordic countries, particularly Denmark, Finland, Norway, and Sweden, were actively pursuing closer ties with China. They engaged in frequent high-level meetings with Beijing, signed multiple memorandums of understanding to enhance bilateral cooperation, and competed to attract Chinese investments. Additionally, they welcomed Chinese-led initiatives such as the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank and were open to China's expanding role in the Arctic. However, perceptions of China in these countries have drastically shifted in recent years. This change began in 2019, a pivotal year.
So this all began in 2019, it's not today, that's like years ago.
Marked by significant controversies. The Huawei scandal, the Hong Kong protests, and the exposure of mass detention camps in Xinjiang led Nordic governments to reassess their relationships with Beijing. The European Union's designation of China as a systemic rival in its 2019 strategy paper was soon adopted by the Finnish and Danish governments, marking a major shift in their approach to China. In Denmark and Sweden, relations with China have further soured due to specific incidents that strained bilateral ties. Denmark faced Chinese sanctions after a satirical cartoon of the Chinese flag with coronavirus symbols and the erection of a pillar of shame sculpture in front of the Danish parliament. In Sweden, the case of Gui Minhai, a Swedish citizen detained by China, coupled with an outright ban on Huawei, worsened relations. The Chinese ambassador to Sweden from 2017 to 2021, known for his aggressive wolf warrior diplomacy, exacerbated the situation. Norway has also seen a cooling of relations with China, despite efforts to mend ties following a 6-year boycott by Beijing after the Nobel Peace Prize was awarded to Liu Xiaobo. Recent Norwegian government reports critical of China have drawn sharp rebukes from the Chinese embassy in Oslo, accusing Norway of harboring a Cold War mentality. Across the Nordic region, China is increasingly seen as a national security threat. While not viewed as an immediate existential danger, China's actions are perceived as adversarial, threatening the liberal freedoms of these nations. Official reports from Nordic security and defense intelligence services, which barely mentioned China 5 years ago, now highlight it as a significant threat. For example, the Swedish report identifies China as one of the hostile states targeting the country's constitutional rights, economic prosperity, and territorial sovereignty. The Nordic countries have also grown more cautious about Chinese investments. Denmark and Sweden have introduced new investment screening mechanisms, while Finland and Norway have amended existing laws to scrutinize foreign investments through a national security lens. Concerns over Chinese involvement in critical infrastructure, particularly in the development of 5G networks, have led these countries to take steps to limit the role of Chinese tech companies like Huawei in their digital infrastructures. Human rights issues have also become central in Nordic-China relations. The 2019 Hong Kong pro-democracy protests and the situation in Xinjiang have prompted Nordic governments to speak out more forcefully against China. In 2021, the Nordic and Baltic governments issued a joint statement expressing grave concern over the treatment of Uyghurs in Xinjiang. The Chinese embassies in Sweden, Denmark, and Norway have responded aggressively to these criticisms, reflecting Beijing's growing frustration with what it sees as interference in its internal affairs. This growing estrangement between China and the Nordic countries is not merely a temporary diplomatic rift, but reflects a deeper, more structural shift in international relations. As we discussed before, Xi sees the
with everything that had happened, their relationship was definitely going to be affected, and it wasn't going to be the same after all.
Nordics as a direct threat to his rule, and the Nordics have figured out that being in bed with China generally means very little upside. In addition to these diplomatic tensions, there is growing concern in the Nordic countries about China's influence on academic and research institutions. Reports have surfaced about Chinese partnerships with Nordic universities and research institutes that allegedly have ties to the People's Liberation Army. These partnerships have raised alarm about the potential misuse of research for military purposes, leading to calls for stricter regulations and greater transparency in international collaborations. The closure of Confucius institutes across the Nordic region is another sign of this deteriorating relationship. These institutes, funded by the Chinese government, were once seen as cultural bridges between China and the rest of the world. However, they are now increasingly viewed with suspicion, perceived as tools for spreading Chinese state propaganda and influencing academic freedom. The recent closure of Finland's last Confucius Institute is indicative of the broader trend of distancing from China. In addition to traditional espionage and cyber threats, the Nordic countries are increasingly concerned about the data security risks posed by Chinese-owned tech.
No, because for China to be using TikTok and just like phone tracking and all of that, that's very, very deep and scary, because no wonder they banned Huawei. Wow. Okay.
Companies like TikTok and Temu, these platforms, widely popular across the globe, have come under scrutiny for their potential to leak sensitive user data to the Chinese government, given China's stringent data sharing laws that compel companies to provide data to the state if requested. TikTok, owned by the Chinese company ByteDance, has faced widespread criticism and regulatory scrutiny in several countries, including those in the Nordic region. The concern is that TikTok's vast collection of user data, including location, browsing history, and even biometric data, could be accessed by the Chinese government, posing significant privacy and security risks. This has led to calls in several Nordic countries for tighter regulations and even potential bans on the app, particularly in contexts involving government officials and sensitive data. Similarly, Temu, an emerging e-commerce platform with ties to China, has raised alarms over data security. Critics argue that platforms like Temu, which require extensive personal and financial information from users, could be exploited for data harvesting, feeding sensitive information back to Chinese authorities. The concerns are compounded by China's broad data security laws and its history of leveraging private companies to further state interest. As we've seen, the Nordic countries are no longer just spectators in the geopolitical arena. They're on the front lines of a growing struggle with China that spans technology, human rights, and global influence, from the expulsion of Huawei and the shutdown of Confucius institutes to offering refuge to Tibetan opposition leaders. The Nordics are taking a stand in ways that could have far-reaching implications. But this isn't just a Nordic story. The choices these countries make now will echo across the globe, influencing how other nations approach their own relationships with China. The future of this dynamic is uncertain, but one thing is clear: the world is watching closely, and so should you. Thanks for sticking with us.
Yeah. Oh, guys, China really has a lot of, you see that TikTok alone has enough information for whatever they need. Honestly, I get where they're coming from in this video, because like the use of biometrics, personal data, everything, their security is at risk. So I don't even blame countries that blame some of this, that ban some of these apps in their country, because if a country is a threat to you and they own something, you definitely want to take it out. Well, that was it for this video. Did you learn anything from here? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, give me a big thumbs up. If you are yet to subscribe to my channel, please do that right away. Thank you so much for all the love on my previous videos, and if you are yet to check them out, please do, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.